Didn't you do the Olympics while pregnant?
Yes.
And did you not get a medal in the Olympics while pregnant?
Yeah, I got a silver medal and then found out I was pregnant later on that day. And so my road team, Uno X, as a result of me telling them that I was pregnant, they decided to rewrite everybody's contracts to put the maternity clause in. Once I found out I was pregnant, I did start to train with more of a heart rate cap. I tried not to spend too much time above 175, which for me is about 90% of my max heart rate. But the biggest problem when I was feeling sick was actually getting on enough food and water, because it was so hard to keep eating and drinking on the bike for the amount of time that I wanted to ride for. It's not a safe sport, like it is a dangerous sport. Right number of days where I had more hours of training than I had hours of sleep the night before. Someone, when they find out you're an athlete, they will comment on something on your body. And I've been told within the same day that I've got massive legs and tiny legs. I know I should have some kind of body dysmorphia, but I'm not sure what it is.
Elinor, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So firstly, congratulations on your pregnancy.
Thank you.
And I want to talk to you, being a professional cyclist, I want to talk to you about performance in sport during training and pregnancy. But I thought we'd start off with a little bit of context for maybe someone who doesn't really know much about professional cycling or women's professional cycling specifically. And there's been quite a few big changes over the past decade, even in terms of the structure of women's cycling and the benefits that they offer that maybe people will be a bit shocked about. Can you give us a little bit of information and background about women's cycling?
Yeah, I mean, just to share my own experiences, even just in the last few years. So I found out I was pregnant summer 2021, and I was due to sign with the road team, imminently, and then also had a contract with British Cycling, or not contract, an agreement with British Cycling for the track side of things. So I had these kind of two employers, I suppose you can kind of call it, even though it doesn't really work like that in sport. And neither of them had any kind of maternity cover policies, maternity leave policies. And so my road team, Uno X, as a result of me telling them that I was pregnant, they decided to rewrite everybody's contracts to put a maternity clause in. And it was a maternity clause with, I would say, really very good conditions. There was no kind of deadline when I had to get back. It was all kind of, we want you to be able to recover on your timeline, come back when it's the right thing for you. I could still receive full access to all of the practitioners that I needed, still received full pay. It was, really phenomenal. And when I found out I was pregnant, I didn't know if I'd still even be able to be a bike rider. So it sounds like, a ridiculous historical thing that we must be talking about to only just have maternity leave. But that was really kind of the reality for me. And then it was the same with British Cycling. I didn't know it, but they had been working on a maternity policy that came in when I was around 10 weeks pregnant, which is great. So even before I told anybody, that had kind of materialized and meant that, again, I could still access all the practitioners. I think it gave me 9 months after having my baby to hit my first target. The target was going to be made in conjunction with my coach, so it was going to be very specific to me. It wasn't going to be like the same target for every rider coming back or anything like that. And so I think about how I felt when I found out I was pregnant in 2021 versus finding out I was pregnant in 2025. I didn't have any of those questions of, am I still going to be a bike rider? Am I still going to be able to speak to the nutritionist and the physio, and how is it going to look? Who's going to help me? I was straight away, I knew who I wanted to talk to about which problems. I knew exactly what situation I was in, really, like across the board with everything. And it's made being able to plan returning to training, returning to racing, just so much easier, so much more straightforward.
Exactly. You actually know what you're working with. So to repeat, that was 2021 that you had, you were pregnant with your first child and you weren't even sure if you could continue to be a cyclist, because maternity pay was introduced kind of 2020 for women's cycling. But as you say, no one really had it written into their contracts. Lizzie Deignan very much paved the way, a very well-known British cyclist having her first child. And it's really changed even in those past few years. And as you say, now you have those expectations, which I guess then when we can talk about training and everything, you know what you're working with. So I just thought that would be quite a nice little context for people who maybe don't know so much about the sport. And then we're going to go in a bit more specifically, Elinor, with your training. But I just want to disclaim at the start that obviously this isn't any like medical advice. If you're having any difficulties through pregnancy, do like speak to your doctor or speak to your midwife. This is just very much interesting conversation about what people can do during pregnancy. It's not any advice or instructions on what to do and what not to do, as our little disclaimer. So Elinor, I want to talk to you about training through pregnancy. Firstly, how has it been? You're 20 weeks pregnant now. How has it been?
Up and down, I would say. Probably until about 9 weeks, I was like, I actually feel really, really good. Was able to train pretty normally. My numbers were fairly good. Once I found out I was pregnant, I did start to train with more of a heart rate cap. So I tried not to spend too much time above 175, which for me is about 90% of my max heart rate. And that's kind of the only real guideline. Otherwise, it's really being guided by how do I feel, what am I actually capable of. So yeah, I felt great up until about 9 weeks, and then had about a month where I was pretty hit and miss, didn't know if I was going to be able to train or not on each given day. And so my hours went from maybe 18 hours a week to maybe 8 hours a week. I think my worst week was about 7 hours. So yeah, about an hour a day was it was a bit of a struggle. But then I really come out the other side. I've had a few bad days now, but I've had a really, really good few weeks before that. So quite happy with it. And I think I've still been able to maintain like quite good training volume when I haven't been feeling sick. But the biggest problem when I was feeling sick was actually getting on enough food and water, because it was so hard to keep eating and drinking on the bike for the amount of time that I wanted to ride for. I mean, if you go for a 4-hour bike ride, you need to have upwards of 80 grams of carbs an hour. You need to be drinking 2 or 3 bottles. And I felt like everything I had was just getting stuck, like not even getting to my stomach, just getting like halfway down my throat and then coming back up. So I didn't really feel like I was getting any nutrition, which obviously isn't great for your performance, for your recovery, but it's also not really great for growing a child, which is what I'm trying to do. So yeah, there were some times where I just had to think, if I can't eat, I can't really ride. Logically, it doesn't really make sense. And then other days where it wasn't even a choice. I couldn't even get to the point of getting my shoes and helmet on. I was just, I'm staying in bed today. This isn't happening.
Exactly.
Very mixed.
Yeah. No, that's super interesting. And I want to ask you then specifically about like the mental side of it. We can go through the different, because I guess there's the physical side, the mental side, and then maybe like you know your professional side of it as well, because obviously you're not just wanting to keep fit, it's your job. So mentally, it's a whole kind of thing that you'll be going through, because there's hormones that kick in pretty heavy, and there's the tiredness and lots of different things, because also usually you would be training at this point, you'd be racing all the time, whereas now you're kind of training for a unknown return date at some point next year. When did you race it up to? Was it at nationals that you had your last race this year?
Yeah, so I stopped racing in bunch races on the road, like in a peloton, once I found out I was pregnant. So I think I maybe did a couple of races before I found out, like really, really early on. But yeah, after I found out, stopped that, it just felt it was too hard to kind of really get my head in the game, because it's not a safe sport. Like, it is a dangerous sport. And the idea of thinking, what I had and what the risk would be, versus what the outcome could be of like even a really good race, I just thought I'd rather try and stay safe and try and get into the pregnancy a bit further. Before I start doing stuff like that. But I did quite a lot of time trials. So I did a lot of local time trials for a long time, basically from 5 weeks onwards. And then my last race was the time trial at the national championships when I was about 15 weeks. Not very comfortable to get into time trial position.
Yeah. I'm sure there's been more comfortable time trials that you've had. But I think that's probably quite surprising that you would be doing such a significant race, the British National Time Trial Championship. It's a big race on the calendar in terms of British cycling, and to be pushing your body that hard, people are probably thinking, "Oh, okay, is that safe?" I thought, women had to, they couldn't do anything during pregnancy. They couldn't lift anything. They couldn't do anything. What's been your experience and your narrative on pushing your body and training throughout pregnancy?
Well, firstly, I wouldn't really say I raced. Like I didn't really compete. I would say that I participated. um, yeah, for context, the last few years I've been on the podium, and this year I was 16th. Like I wasn't pushing myself to the same point, because I did have that heart rate cap that I wanted to. I'm not really treating it as 174 beats per minute is safe, 175 beats per minute is disaster. But I don't want to spend too much time above that. That's kind of what all the literature that my coach and myself have been looking at, is to say that above 90% of your max heart rate is when the baby tends to get a little bit less blood flow, which is not really what you want to sustain. So it was a really fun challenge, actually. I think it was really nice to have that goal to motivate myself to kind of take up a big chunk of the pregnancy, because I didn't want to look at it as, right, I've just got a 9-month block now with no racing. I wanted something to break it up, and that got me almost 4 months of the way through, which is really, really nice to have that to focus on, to break it up. And then it was quite nice to be able to look at things in a slightly different way. So I could look at the course and think, right, I've got this limiting factor in my heart rate. So how can I play with this on the course? Where am I going to really go hard? Because there were points I think my heart rate went to about 190, but it was very brief. And then I would let it come back down again.
It's like you have this like finite amount that you can spend and you're like, where am I going to fit this? I'm going to drop a coin here. I'm going to go here.
And it's always the case in time trials. Like you do have a finite amount of energy to expend anyway, but it was just very literal, right in front of me. And so that was quite fun to play with. I hoped for a better result. From my training data and comparing to previous races last few years, we were hoping that I'd be able to maybe get in a top 10. Like that was my goal. And then I got like 2 minutes in, and I don't know if it's just the excitement, adrenaline of being at a race, but my heart rate was already at its max. I was like, oh.
You're like, oh dear.
I was like, I don't think I'm going to get a result today. So it was still really fun, and I'm so glad that I did it. But I would, definitely consider it a participation rather than, I wasn't a threat to the win of the podium or anything like that.
And what about the mental side of pregnancy? We kind of alluded to that there. And obviously you described how actually breaking it up mentally, it was a lot easier than just having this 9 months block. And then of course, that's when you have the child, you're not exactly going to go back to racing straight afterwards. How is that side been with training and motivation and everything in between?
I actually haven't struggled for motivation at all, really. I think what's been hard has been feeling really ill, really tired, and really wanting to train. But yeah, motivation wise, I think because I had that goal of getting to national as well. And then I've definitely had a nice second trimester hiccup of energy, not feeling so fatigued. I've got way more good days than bad days, which is fantastic. I know that that's not going to last forever. So part of me is like, okay, make the most of this. This is where I'm really need to bank some good training. And I've got some kind of, silly little goals, things that I want to achieve, tick off, like a number of hours that I want to be able to maintain per week, that kind of thing. And that stuff really keeps me motivated. But I think it is knowing that actually I'm at the top of a curve that's only going to go down until it's time to have a baby. And eventually it's going to come back up. But the higher I can keep the curve, the higher the bottom of it, essentially. Like the fitter I can go to my pregnancy, the into childbirth, the easier it'll be on the other side to come back and to feel fit quicker.
Yeah, exactly. It's that, you're not going to be training or you're not going to be racing, at the end of the year. But if you then only have to take 6 weeks off or 8 weeks off or 10 weeks off, rather than having taken several months off, the sooner you can keep going up to it, I guess, mentally as well. Like the mental side of it will be a huge thing, as well as obviously physically and what is safe and recommended, like post-birth.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is interesting how a lot of it is for future you, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. And there is something quite nice actually about I thought it'd be really boring not having any races to switch things up, but it's actually quite nice to have such a big training block and to try and kind of see what I can get done in that time. It's it's kind of I think I've just managed to kind of switch my thinking a little bit away from racing and onto training for a long amount of time.
And I want to talk to you about each trimester going through it. So if we maybe use your previous pregnancy as an example, because obviously you've completed that, you've done 1, 2, and 3. And can you just talk me through what your training looked like, maybe how it changed through each trimester, and what sort of things you were doing?
It's I would say I've had two very, very different pregnancies, and I think a lot of that was very circumstantial. So last time I found out I was pregnant at 8 weeks, and me and my boyfriend weren't yet living together. We were living separately because I was training for the Olympics for Great Britain. He was working for the Olympics for Denmark. We were basically ready to move in as soon as the Olympics were finished, which is also when I found out I was pregnant. So we kind of had to accelerate that process a lot, but it took a lot of time. I think also the mental side of thinking, oh my God, I'm so not prepared for this. Like, what do we do? Took up a lot of energy and a lot of time to, learn all the things about having a baby and what are we going to do? We had to move house. There was just a lot of things that needed taken care of that took away from what limited energy I had that
Mm-hmm.
I could use on the bike. So I think my
And didn't you do the Olympics while pregnant?
yes, yeah.
Let's not forget that. Just slight point. And did you not get a medal in the Olympics while pregnant?
Yeah, I got a silver medal and then found out I was pregnant later on that day.
Later on that day. Oh my gosh.
Specific day.
And you're like, oh, okay, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something cool for your kid to tell his friends at school when he's older.
I know. Yeah, he's got a cool fact for life that he technically has competed in the Olympics. Yeah.
Yeah.
At age 8-week-old fetus.
Still counts. Still counts.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing.
I felt like it was so broken up and it was very hard to kind of get a real any kind of consistency really. Whereas now, this time, we're much more settled. We're in our house. We know what a baby needs. We knew that this was going to happen at some point. So we just felt like, okay, that's taken care of. Now I can just focus on training. So I've had a lot more consistency this time. I've been able to fit a lot more training in. And I think actually as a result, I felt better. I think last time it kind of felt like I just went from the first trimester, had a little, maybe 10 days of feeling good, and then was straight into the third trimester and felt big and heavy and tired. Whereas this time I felt like it's been a lot more like, okay, first trimester, tired and sick, second trimester, much more energy. I'm hoping I'm going to be able to keep that going because, it's just been a lot easier to deal with this time, I would say, even though I've got a toddler to run around after as well.
Mm-hmm. And what was your training looking like? Was it inside, so on a turbo trainer where you can cycle indoors, or is it outside on the roads, which is perhaps more interesting but more risky? What was it looking like? Was there strength training involved as well? What did you kind of see a benefit of?
So I rode on the road. For as old as a kid, which was about until 6 or 7 months. But I had my little boy was measuring 97th percentile. He was absolutely huge, and so I had a huge bump. I ride quite an aggressive position as well. So there was just no way that I was going to be able to carry on riding my bike. So when I got a new bike in December for my team for the next year, the mechanics just left the whole entire steer on. So normally you'd cut off 20 centimeters, something like that. And I just kept the whole thing on and rode really, really upright, almost on like a Dutch bike. And then eventually that also got too uncomfortable to ride. So I had to flip the handlebars, which obviously meant I couldn't ride outside on the bike. So I did mostly turbo from there on. I did do a little bit of mountain biking. I borrowed my friend's bike, once a week maybe, and rode on the road on that. And then started probably about the same time to do a lot of swimming, some cross training, like actually on a cross trainer in the gym. And I did gym the whole time. Yeah. And actually I think more towards the end, I started doing gym maybe 3 times a week because it was just so much more comfortable than riding a bike. It was a really nice way to get some training in.
How do you think that the narrative on pregnancy, training through pregnancy, doing any sport at all or any sort of movement has changed? I would say even recently, you'll see a lot of things on Instagram of I trained like this and therefore I look like this after pregnancy. And a lot of them do get a lot of hate, but they also put a lot of work in. But then I think previously there's been this discussion of, you can't do anything throughout it at all. So maybe someone's thinking, oh my goodness, this sounds like a lot of things that you're doing here. What was your view on that? What was your advice, your research? How was that narrative? Because I'm sure you had people telling you, oh my goodness, that's a lot of things to be doing. You've got to be awfully careful. What was your thoughts on it?
I mean, I knew because of riders before me that you can train a lot through pregnancy. I didn't know exactly what they were doing, but luckily my coach at the time had coached previous pregnant athletes, and yeah, to a really high level, and so he knew exactly what he was doing. I think the biggest change I've noticed between the two pregnancies is when I first told people that I was pregnant, they said, like, are you gonna retire now? Is that it? Or like, how long can you keep training for? And I've noticed a lot of the time during this pregnancy that people have asked me when I'm going to stop racing, like during the pregnancy. And I've even had people asking me this week while I'm quite visibly pregnant, when do you have to stop racing? And I'm like, well, I actually stopped racing a little while ago, but it's really cool that that's the question that people ask now. Yeah. At the same time, I think there's also those old philosophies of when you're pregnant, you shouldn't lift heavy things, like you shouldn't be straining yourself, shouldn't be trying too hard. And I think it's so funny when I'm carrying a bag of shopping or something that's got like milk and bread and eggs in it, and someone comes to help me, and I'm like, oh, I'm actually walking from the gym where I just lifted like 80 kilos, but okay, you can carry
it. Thank you. You can take my bag.
Yeah, so I think it's funny. There is still kind of that hangover, I think, even with people that know that you can do a huge amount of exercise now.
And what would be your advice to someone who's maybe listening to this and thinking, okay, right, this is interesting, but what things should I keep in mind if I'm writing a plan, or I'm going to be doing more exercise, or I'm active anyway? And this is great because I can do more. But what limitations or precautions did you put in specifically for your training and working with your coach that you would think were most important?
I think the heart rate cap is, again, it's very hard to prove any of these things. But I think
because you can't study pregnant women, so there's no research at all on pregnant women because it's unethical, which does make sense. But
well, there are some studies on on the blood flow from the placenta to the baby during exercise, but it's very hard to get it like live timing. There's always a little bit of a delay, like 20-30 seconds, so it's really hard to actually get any like realistic data, I suppose, anything that's very reliable. So yeah, you kind of have to take it with a bit of a pinch of salt, but I definitely feel very safe going up to that maximum, even going past it, as long as it's not for that long of a time. And the kind of mentality that my coach and I've had is, well, how long could a baby hold their breath for? Is essentially what's happening when you limit the blood flow for a short amount of time. And 10 seconds, I think, is fine, is absolutely fine. So I tend to be guided by that kind of thing. But generally, I think if you've been active already, there's not really a reason that you should stop, as long as you feel good. If anything hurts, if it makes you feel worse, if you just feel too tired, then maybe it's best to rest that day. I think you can keep activity and help. So I think generally, most of the time, there's usually some kind of activity that's made me feel better when I felt really, really nauseous. It's not always riding because of the position you're in. It's not nice to be kind of bent forward. Sometimes it'll be going for a walk or something instead. I think it can make you feel so much better. Like, the power of endorphins is still really, really relevant when you're pregnant. And God, I can't imagine going 9 months without having any of that. I think that would make it really, really hard. It would make it a long time.
And then going into childbirth without any fitness or exercise is also quite terrifying.
Yeah, probably the trickiest physical challenge of your life. You need to have some fitness for that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, I guess, where it is a little bit murky of, because everybody has such a different labor and so many things can go wrong or right. And there's so many like margins for differences. But did you feel like it was beneficial, all of that work that you put in, which obviously was majority for you going back to cycling, not training specifically for labour? But did you feel like that was a benefit to you?
I mean, it's hard to know. I wouldn't have chosen my labour to go the way that it did. And so yeah, maybe if it had done, I'd be sitting here thinking, yeah, it's all because of me, it's all because of the activity that I did. But I can't see that it would have done me any harm at all. I think it was the best thing that I could have done for myself and for my son. And there's also a lot of studies to show that as your child grows up, if you've been active in pregnancy, that's really, really beneficial for them. And so, yeah, I definitely wouldn't change it, but I can't say that it helped necessarily.
Quite hard to quantify. Quite hard to quantify.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, if it did help it, then oh my god, I can't imagine what it would seem like.
An interesting perspective. Exactly. Maybe don't dwell on that for too long.
Too much.
And talk to me about recovery. Obviously, a massive event in any woman's life. And therefore the recovery looks very different for everybody. But what was your recovery like?
So I spent 5 days in the hospital after he was born, and spent a lot of the time thinking, oh god, I just want to go home now. But actually the difference from day 1 to day 5, both in terms of physically how much better I felt, but also kind of how much we as parents were able to learn about how to look after a baby, because every time we had a question, there was someone there that had some experience we could ask. It was massive. It was a huge, huge learning curve, huge recovery curve. So by the time I got home, I felt all right. I had an emergency C-section, so yeah, kind of a double recovery, I suppose, in a way.
Yeah.
So that was quite tough. But actually, I think in lots of ways, it was a bit easier than I thought it would be. If I was able to go out for a walk after about a week or so, kind of used the pram as a bit of a Zimmer frame to take some weight off me, which is nice. But I was mostly really shocked about how small the scar was. I think it's like 10 days or something that you have to leave some kind of dressing on. And I thought I would take it off and have this like huge, really gory thing looking back at me. And I was like, oh my God, a baby came out of that really tiny little line. Like, that's amazing. And yeah, I think the principles that my coach and I kind of took for recovery and will take again, it wasn't 2 weeks after birth, you can do this training, 3 weeks after birth, you can do this training. It was very much, once you've done X, you can do Y. And there was a very strict order in which things should happen. So I had to be able to walk for, I think, 2 hours, 2 days in a row before I was allowed to go to the gym. And then I had to do 45 minutes on the cross trainer, hitting certain heart rates 2 days in a row, and then I was allowed to ride a bike. And there was a long time, or it felt like a very long time anyway, in between those markers. It was a slow build up, and there was a lot of complete rest days in between, to allow things to recover if needed. And I think that kind of approach to recovery was really, really good, because there were some points that I was like, oh, actually, I couldn't complete that session that we had planned, even though that's what we had on the plan for 3 days and 2 weeks afterwards. I just couldn't do it. So then we would just move back a day or 2 days or 3 days or something. And then some days I'd feel absolutely amazing. And I think if we didn't have that mentality, I would have been like, well, I can go on the bike for 2 hours today. I'm absolutely fine. And I think having that to kind of rein me in, because I was so eager to get back to it, was really, really useful, and probably helped me long term as well.
And being an athlete, you have a very intimate relationship with your body, how it works, how you're feeling. If you're hurting in a particular spot, if you're getting ill, if you're feeling really good, it like many people wouldn't, because it's how you really gauge things day in, day out. Throughout pregnancy and then throughout your recovery, what were some things that surprised you about your body that you were like, oh my goodness, this is wild? Having listened to your body for how many years throughout your career, what surprised you?
I was really surprised what I could achieve on very poor, very little broken sleep for such a long time. So I think as athletes, I mean, I was probably borderline lazy in how much time I would spend in bed beforehand, and never really trained before 10 a.m. if I could help it. Tried not to get out of bed before 9 a.m. if I could help it. Really, really liked to be horizontal a lot of the time. And I felt like that was what I needed to recover and to do well. And actually, I didn't really need quite so much. I don't know if there's something hormonally that happens after you have a baby, that you can just get on with it. Even when it feels awful, you can just kind of get on with it a bit better than beforehand. So that really surprised me, because I did think, if you showed me the stats of how much sleep I was getting versus how much riding I was doing, I would say absolutely not. That's impossible. Like, there were quite a number of days where I had more hours of training than I had hours of sleep the night before, which is like horrible. But I actually felt all right, and I think that exercise really helped. And then there were a lot of things that surprised me that I had no control over, like my hair fell out after like 4 or 5 months or something, and I had no idea that was going to happen. Thought something really bad was going on. Yeah, huge surprise. It just came out. And I think it felt like every time everything settled down, there'd be a big surprise like that, and you'd just be like, "What? Where did that come from?" So there is quite a lot to learn, but I think it's quite amazing how much your body can change and morph and shapeshift and meet all these different demands, and yeah, you can still function afterwards. Like, you can be absolutely on the edge of exhaustion, but yeah, because your body's going through so many different, so many different demands in a day.
A whole new level of appreciation. And I want to talk to you about body image, because I guess as an athlete, especially as a cyclist, it's all down to power to weight. You want to be lean, you want to be light, you want to be powerful. Therefore, becoming pregnant, you put on weight, you grow a child, you then have the child, and then you have more weight than likely you've ever had in your entire life. And then you have, you go on this journey to perhaps lose it, get back to your race weight, but you also have a baby to look after. Mentally, what was the psychological impact maybe on body image? Was it something that bothered you, surprised you, going through it, still training, still working hard, yet, putting on weight because you're growing an actual child? How was that process? First time round, maybe, versus second time round?
It was quite hard. I think I would probably count myself quite lucky that in the cycling world, I've been in a very nice little corner of it where there hasn't really been a whole lot of pressure to be super skinny. And if anything, I've been encouraged to gain weight at times, which has been really nice, because I think as a track endurance rider, it's where power is the most important. Power to weight is a little bit important, but power is what you really, really need. And power to CDA, like how airy you are, is really what's going to win you races. So that's what we put a lot more time and energy into. So I feel like I've been very lucky with the environments I've been in. That said, I found being pregnant really, really hard. Especially, I think the comments that you get from people, which you get as an athlete, you get anyway. I think as soon as you meet someone and they find out you're an athlete, they will comment on something on your body. And I've been told within the same day by total strangers that I've got massive legs and tiny legs. And you're like, well, I know I should have some kind of body dysmorphia, but I'm not sure what it is.
Yeah.
But I know it's extreme. And so I think it was a similar situation in pregnancy where, yeah, and so many women get this, where people are very surprised that you're not just kind of you plus a tiny baby-sized bump by the end. And so you get a lot of comments like, God, are you still pregnant? You must have passed your due date now. The baby must be due any minute, when you're like 6 months pregnant. Are you sure it's not twins in there? Like all that kind of stuff. And it was just relentless every single day. And I found that really hard to deal with, because you've got so little control over it. Like, some people do have a tiny bump, some people are huge, and I was one of the people that was huge. And there was nothing that I could really do. And I think afterwards as well, it surprised me how many people thought that as soon as you have a baby, you go back immediately to how you looked before. And people would be outwardly surprised that I still had, I guess, like kind of a baby bump after 2 or 3 weeks, or even after a few days. You know, I sent a picture to my family from the hospital, and my sister said, "But you've had the baby, so why do you still look pregnant?" And I was like, "What? Where do you think it's going to go? Like, it takes a bit of time to go back to normal." And so I found that really, really hard. And I think a lot of it is the comments of like well-meaning people, but when you hear it again and again and again, it's really hard to take on. And yeah, it's just a huge change to go through. And you really don't have a huge amount of control over how your body responds to pregnancy. Like, I trained a lot during my last pregnancy, and I still put on loads and loads of weight. I say I ate reasonably well, but still put on loads of weight. Like, there's stuff you can do to help, but I think how your body responds is just how it's going to respond. Yeah, ultimately. And then it's quite hard to come back from that as well. It did feel a bit strange putting on cycling kit. Also because I had quite a lot of ab separation, which I think everybody has to some extent. But I really felt like putting on cycling kit, I didn't feel as kind of, I don't know, it just felt strange. It felt like putting it on somebody else's body. It was really, really, really odd. And that took a bit of time to go back to normal.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of pressure put on women, maybe by women, by themselves, by other people making comments, as you say, often well-meaning people. And it can be our friends around us, our family around us. And they're probably the ones that stick, because even though they do not mean anything bad by it, I think part of us, until you go through it, you are surprised that maybe you don't bounce back. And if you have always been a small person, a lean person with not much body fat, it is a strange phenomenon. And I think that the narrative on social media is really encouraging in some ways, because there's a lot of information out there, there's people training, but it also adds a lot of pressure on that bounce back. I would call it, the bounce back phenomenon of people thinking that immediately they're going to be, right where they were before. And then you bring into Instagram of angles, poses, high-waisted shorts, or whatever it is. And it makes it all very unrealistic while you're sleep deprived, hormonal, trying your absolute best. It's a lot.
It's a lot. I think Instagram is also kind of, or social media is a bit of a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, I think I've seen more people showing how their body looks in the day or the days after having a baby, and it looks like how mine did. And you think, oh, that's really good that people are kind of are showing it and normalizing it. Then when you have a baby, you can look down and think, yeah, this is how so-and-so looked when they had theirs, and now they look like this, and it'll get back to normal. There's also a lot of just lies, I think, like just complete and utter lies. I mean, there's one woman in particular that keeps popping up on my feed, and she'll say, like, this is my daily routine with a 3-day-old baby. And you see the baby and you're like, that baby is 4 months old. Like, this is not a newborn baby. This is not you 3 days after having a baby. But it gets loads and loads of views. It gets loads of comments. And so that's why she does it, I guess. But yeah, she obviously also doesn't look like she has a 3-day-old baby, because she doesn't. She has a 4-month-old baby. Yeah, so I think you need to be really careful what you're consuming, and what you're paying attention to, because I think a lot of it is kind of just designed to make you feel bad if you don't respond in the same way.
And as an athlete, a person in the public space, people will look up to you. Younger girls, they'll look up to you as a cyclist, as a female cyclist, like pioneering the way. You'll be an inspiration. Then that leads to quite a lot of pressure of how you're adding to that narrative, because no matter whether you like it or not, you'll be adding to the narrative in some way or the other, whether you talk about things or not. It's a decision of, if you participate, if you don't, that's also adding to it in a way. What is your approach on the narrative of pregnancy, of post-pregnancy, of training through pregnancy? In Instagram, for example, if we isolate that, it's really difficult, because it's such a finite, it's a photo, maybe a video, and a few words. And it's hard to encapsulate that. Obviously, a podcast is a longer form platform for that. But if we take Instagram, say, or any other public platform that you might put content out on, what are your views or approach to that?
I mean, I would say generally I don't feel a lot of pressure to prove myself, I suppose, because I know that there are a lot of women who now have had babies and gone on to have massive, massive success. So I don't feel like I need to prove that it's possible. Yeah. I think what I'm really cautious of is either making it sound impossible, and therefore kind of making employers, or in my case, cycling teams, shy away from other pregnant athletes and maybe think, oh, actually, do we want to get involved in that? So I don't want to just share all the really hard stuff and make it sound like it's impossible to do both, which at times it does feel like. But then I'm also really conscious of only sharing the times that things have gone well, and being really like, oh, if I can do it, you can do it too. Because
Mhm.
there's a lot of reasons that I can do it that aren't really to do with me. It's to do with having a stable income, having a husband who works from home and is really hands on, having supportive family, having a lot of um, support staff around me, like physios, nutritionists, all that kind of stuff. Like, there's so many reasons that I was able to do it that aren't actually to do with myself and my motivation and my abilities. And so I think it's a really hard line, like a fine line to toe, and I feel like I have gotten it wrong at times, and not really been happy with how I've answered an interview question, or yeah, or shared my experiences, because I'm really scared of being too much in one camp or another.
Yeah, it's that balance which is very hard to strike the balance of.
Yeah.
And I guess just being authentic is the most important part of it, isn't it? Because as you say, some days are great, some days are bad. And that's probably what people mostly want to hear.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting, perspective of how how your experience was and what you've been able to achieve since that, and then obviously going through another pregnancy and looking ahead as well. Just the approach of that, I think, is just opening up the narrative and normalizing discussing it is something that's so important in itself.
Mm. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And I want to talk to you about nutrition as well, because we touched on it slightly of, you're throwing up all the time. The last thing you want is to actually think about nutrition. But nutrition in pregnancy as a whole is, I think there's pressure in that in itself, of what to eat, how much to eat, the quantities of, whether, your baby's going to take all the nutrients out. So if you're eating rubbish, it's going straight into the child that you're growing. And then of course you add in the performance athlete maintaining, body weight, but also, growing a child. Where is the nutrition approach been? How has that changed from before pregnancy to during pregnancy for you?
Um, yeah, I suppose it does change quite a bit. I think the first thing that I was really keen on was all the vitamins I needed to get. I think especially as an athlete, you can't just take a pregnancy vitamin off the shelf. So I've had to go and find
Mhm.
properly UK Sport batch tested versions of all of those individual vitamins, which is
Yeah.
quite a job in itself. But that was kind of the first one. And I do notice if I miss a few days, I really notice in how I feel. So I think that's probably been the most important. And there's definitely times in pregnancy where it's just like, what can I actually physically eat that doesn't make me throw up? And that's what you're going to eat for the next few weeks. So that's just kind of how it goes. So definitely had like toast and pasta, and that's about it really for like a week, I think, at one point. Yeah, I think you kind of do have to listen to your cravings at some point. But it is quite a funny, like another kind of old wives' tale is like, oh, when you're pregnant, you can eat whatever you want. And I find it really strange that people say that, because a lot of my friends said that to me the first time. They were like, "Oh, are you just eating absolutely everything now?" And I was like, "But like I'll still gain weight and be unhealthy. Like if like all of those things will still happen to me just because I'm
Mhm.
pregnant. If anything, it's probably more exacerbated because you are gaining so much weight anyway."
Yeah.
Yeah, so I thought that was interesting. But I do feel in this pregnancy very, very sensitive to any kind of like unhealthy food. So if I have a piece of cake or a pastry or something at a cafe, then I really notice that I feel a lot worse the next day.
Well,
And it might be that the hormones that are making me go for that cake or that pastry or whatever it is are what make me feel bad the next day. It might, yeah, it's probably not a correlation. It's probably not causation. It's probably a correlation, but I really, really do notice it. So I try and stay away from anything like that as much as I can. And I'm still deciding if that's like a blessing or a curse, really.
I know. There's like, that's kind of good, but also like kind of rubbish. It's like,
Yeah. Especially when there's loads of really good food around and you're like, oh, just really want something. um, yeah, and I've tried to like make food from scratch as much as possible, which again, it's nice to have the nudge to do that, but don't really have the resources to do it every single day. So yeah,
yeah.
yeah, win or lose. But yeah, I think it is. I think it's probably a time to be like more focused on nutrition than usual, because, like you said, you are sharing nutrients with somebody else. Someone's going to take all of the good stuff, so you need to make sure that you've got excess less of all of that good stuff, really. And I think the energy balance is a very hard thing to get right, because again, you don't want to be eating way too much every day, but I still think that eating a bit too much is better than eating not enough. So I tend to try and veer towards, if I'm in doubt, I'll eat something. But I think also the consequences of just being like a bit hungry are like, I don't know how you felt, but I'll go from being absolutely fine to like, I'm gonna pass out.
It's not pretty. It's not pretty.
Cozy. And I think because you feel so full anyway, stomach's full of a baby, your hunger cues are so different. So you almost don't notice until it's like you've gone past the point.
Until it's almost too late.
Yeah.
Or rationale has gone out and someone could get killed.
Yeah. Oh my
it's
God.
Not good.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Watch out.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, definitely going for like a little and often kind of keep feeding the monster kind of approach.
Yeah, absolutely. I heard someone say that because they're pregnant, it means that they have an excuse not to exercise. And I was like, interesting. Okay. I mean, obviously everyone will approach it very differently, and some people really struggle to exercise, but using that as an excuse not to do anything made me go, oh my goodness, okay. But I guess people approach it differently. But
I definitely use it as an excuse not to do any kind of housework. So I think
that is different. That is different, exactly. You don't really get the endorphins from housework, sadly.
Your priorities just shift, I guess, and whatever was at the bottom just goes out the window, and you're like, I'm just not doing that. I haven't got the energy for everything that I used to do, so that one's gone.
Exactly. Oh dear. What a shame. Oh, amazing. And what is kind of your, would we even call it like a mantra or like a viewpoint? What when things are getting tough, which they do throughout pregnancy, what is it that you fall back on? What is the thing that keeps you going?
I will admit that I have definitely cried to my husband a few times and been like, so unfair that we're both getting a baby, but you feel fine and I feel rubbish. And I don't want him to feel bad. I just want us to both to feel good. Or for him to feel bad sometimes so that I can feel good a bit more often.
Just feel it for a day and then you can understand.
So I think it can be really hard, especially when you felt sick for weeks on end, because it does make your life a bit smaller. Like what you can achieve in a day, what you feel like doing, what's enjoyable definitely shrinks, and you have to just for a short amount of time, maybe for some women not at all, some women are fine, but for a short amount of time, your life does shrink a little bit, and that's quite hard to deal with, I think. For someone that likes to jam a lot into life, having to just say like, oh God, no, this weekend or this rest day, I'm actually just going to lie on the sofa and not do anything or see anyone is a bit rubbish. But yeah, it's such a short amount of time, really, in regards to like your whole life. And I try and use the best parenting advice I've had to try and apply to this, which is that everything's a phase. Like it will pass for sure. And at some point I'll think, oh, wasn't it nice when I could just lie on the sofa and just look after myself for a little bit? If my toddler's out with somebody else, then and not have a tiny screaming human to look after. Like try and always find some kind of small positive about what's good about that moment, what could be worse. God, that sounds terrible, like I'm saying it's worse.
I think we know what you mean. Don't worry.
Enjoy the luxury of just looking after myself for a little bit is what I mean.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about what encouragement you would give to women maybe going through pregnancy, struggling with pregnancy. And, you said everything is phase, which I think is a really good point of view. Is there anything you'd like to add? Any other like little encouragements that you would have, maybe, specific to being active or trying to be active? What would you want people to take away from this conversation?
I think one thing that I find really hard to do when it's myself and vice versa with my friends is giving ourselves the credit that we would give each other. So when I've had friends that have been also professional riders or just very active people and they're having a rubbish day, I'm like, well, you're probably growing a kidney today, or something really big is happening in your body and that's why you're feeling so tired and so rubbish. But when it's me, I think, oh my God, I'm so useless. loads of people do loads more stuff when they're pregnant and I'm absolutely rubbish, and get into that negative self-talk. I would try and speak to yourself as you would a friend that's going through the same thing, which is, yeah, easier said than done. Advice that I would try and take.
Yeah, and very, very applicable advice. Pregnant or not, I think we all need to give ourselves a little bit more credit
Yeah.
for what we're going through, because everyone is trying their best, and especially through this period of life. Yeah, very, very much applicable. Well, thank you so much, Elinor. I've really enjoyed this conversation, just discussing, I guess, being active, your experience, and how it's all been as well. It's always interesting to hear a personal account, and I wish you well through your next second half of your pregnancy and your recovery as well.
Thank you
And
so much.
what a
You
lovely
too.
conversation.